Happy New Year! I'm Barry Mitchell, and welcome to Simply Science. Well, 2021 is finally here, and with it the usual New Year's resolutions, those lofty goals that we're going to make healthy changes in our lives. Carol Ann Riddell has some scientific information on how you can make positive changes that will last beyond January.
We've all been there. January 1st rolls around and we are determined to break our bad habits and kickstart the healthy ones. You know the drill. Eat better, exercise more, spend less. But research shows mixed results when it comes to keeping those promises to ourselves. According to a recent survey, 27% of people say they made resolutions for 2020. And among those, 35% kept all of them. 49% kept some, but not all, and 16% didn't keep any. So what's behind the disconnect?
You can't make a decision to form a habit. It just doesn't work that way. You can't decide through a New Year's resolution that you're going to change your old habits, and so change them in that way.
Wendy Wood is a professor of psychology and business at the University of Southern California. She's also the author of Good Habits, Bad Habits. She explains habits form and change through experience.
All of us can decide to go to the gym today. We can decide to save money, not spend as much. We can decide to be more patient with our families, but that's a short-term decision. It's hard to hold on to those. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of concentration to do that. And our habits are still there when we're tired and we want to quit. And that's why we fall back on them, is because habit memory doesn't change when our decisions change.
You can probably guess what tops the list as far as what people want to change. Of those 2020 resolutions, the most common were doing more exercise or improving fitness at 46%, improving diet, 45%, losing weight, 44%, and saving more money, 41%. The good news, change is not out of reach, and understanding the science behind habit formation could help. Let's start with the concept of friction.
There was a great study done that followed cell phones, hundreds of thousands of cell phones for about 2 months. Obviously, the people holding them, to figure out how far they were going to a paid fitness center, to a gym. And what they found is that if phones, and obviously the people holding them, went over 5 miles to a gym, they only went once a month on average. But if people went 3.6 miles on average to a gym, they went 5 times a month. So what that tells us is distance is friction on going to the gym.
Another important piece of this, reward. Professor Wood says we're likely to repeat behavior that makes us feel good.
Habits form best when we release dopamine, and dopamine is a response to a reward, immediately when we're doing the behavior.
The key is to find the thing that you really do enjoy.
Exactly, or add something to it so that you enjoy it. I used to be a runner, and I can't run anymore, so I started working out on an elliptical. But I figured that I can let myself read trashy novels and watch stupid TV shows. And so that addition has actually made me really enjoy working out now. So if you can figure out things like that to do that make it more enjoyable, then you're more likely to form a habit.
Practical advice that might just help you make this year healthier and happier. I'm Carol Ann Riddell for Simply Science.
And now, how do you relieve yourself in zero gravity? Donna Hanover speaks to an actual astronaut to discuss toilets in space.
NASA has sent a new toilet to the International Space Station, and astronauts who've been there, like Jessica Meir, say it's 65% smaller, 40% lighter, and better for women than the old toilet.
So aside from just easier to use and providing better capability to serve dual function ops while you're going to the bathroom, it also should be easier to maintain.
What are you meaning when you say dual function ops?
So dual ops, I'm just talking about number one and number two at the same time. Sometimes, especially I think for women, it's hard to separate those functions, and something that we don't really think about very much when we're using a normal toilet.
Space toilets use suction, like a vacuum, to pull urine and feces away from the body and into the proper receptacles. A funnel pulls away urine, and the seat is there for bowel movements. How is the new toilet better for women than the old one?
This new seat height and position allows you to get that funnel in a position where you can have access to it even while you're sitting on the seat.
Jessica became especially famous on October 18, 2019, as part of the first all-female spacewalk with her friend and colleague Christina Cook. And they did 2 more day-long spacewalks together after that.
We called ourselves Space Sisters.
Their work is intense, but Jessica, like most astronauts, has a sense of humor about all kinds of questions, even on bodily functions. Like, why is it important to keep the urine separate?
So we are actually processing that urine, filtering it, and getting it all ready in a form that we can drink it again as drinking water, to hydrate our food, to drink for ourselves, to fill up those water bags. Today's coffee becomes tomorrow's coffee.
Expedition 63 mission commander Chris Cassidy even made a video showing how the original toilet works.
You take the valve and you turn it on. You hear the fan noise. Check for airflow.
Chris used a water bag to simulate how urine would get sucked down the funnel. Then for number 2,
The seat here is about 5 or 6 inches in diameter, and there's a plastic liner in there where your deposit goes.
he used a package of vegetables that he doesn't really like for that demonstration.
You clean yourself, and the wipes go into there as well. You take this red tab, you pull it off the rim, and depends on how full the container is. This one's about halfway through. We do have a stick, and you push it down in there with all its other friends.
One other improvement in the new toilet is the automatic start of airflow when the seat is lifted, which helps with odor control. Astronauts say the first few times you use a toilet in space do feel a little weird, and the best tips for how to hold steady and prevent mistakes come from crewmates.
You don't want things to be floating away from you in that environment.
Now, your standard earthbound toilet relies on gravity to help you eliminate waste. Gravity also helps you know when you need to go to the bathroom. It's different when you're weightless in space.
Sensing that fullness of your bladder, a lot of that's kind of gravity dependent. You know, of course, here on Earth, all of that urine will sink down to the bottom. It'll be resting in the bottom of your bladder and putting pressure there. In space, it's not necessarily going to be there until your bladder's really full. And I found that in the beginning, it was a little bit complicated where I didn't necessarily feel like I needed to go to the bathroom. And then suddenly it's like, okay, I really need to pee right now.
The old toilets will remain functioning alongside the new one on the space station, so there's more capacity to accommodate larger crews. Meanwhile, the new style of toilet will be along on trips to a different destination in the near future.
The same version will also be in the Artemis II spacecraft. So that is the Orion spacecraft that will be going to the moon, going in orbit around the moon, and then coming back.
So do you want to test it on one of those missions?
Absolutely. I hope that my first test of this system is on a lunar mission. I would love to be involved with those Artemis missions and sending the first woman and the next man back to the moon.
Getting the answers to usually private questions, I'm Donna Hanover for Simply Science.
Weather is unpredictable and can be treacherous, but new improved forecasts are helping us to brace against disaster. Here's Mike Gilliam.
This has been one of the most active hurricane seasons in history, with 23 named storms costing more than 350 lives and billions of dollars. And while long-range trends like hurricane season come every year, and we can tell a couple of weeks in advance if a storm is headed our way, there's a huge gap between long-range forecasts and the shorter forecast you get on TV or your phone. That's where the subseasonal forecast fits in.
Subseasonal forecasting is basically just trying to cover that period that goes beyond the 10-day time frame and is between that, and then you have the super long range.
Joe Chaffee and Joe Rayo are veteran television meteorologists in New York who now partner together on the Joe and Joe Interactive Weather Show on Facebook.
They're watching us all over, Joe.
Both say there are some big pluses to a subseasonal forecast.
If it looks like your particular area is going to be vulnerable to a tropical storm or a hurricane, you might be able to do some prep work ahead of time.
If you know that it's going to get very cold and very snowy, and if you happen to be into, let's say, Home Depot, for example, you may know that it may very well be time to prepare for a heavier amount of sales in terms of snow shovels.
Farmers would like to have a leg up in terms of planting and harvesting around longer range weather patterns.
And Joe says stock traders are watching these forecasts to determine futures for energy or gas and oil prices. But this type of forecasting is not easy or the same as short-term forecasts.
For the most part, the forecasts that you see have absolutely no human interaction with those forecasts. They're all digitally produced.
Joe says those forecasts are produced by the various weather models like the GFS model or the European model. And with short-range forecasts, the meteorologists can observe actual weather and use that information. But you can't just look at what's happening now on the West Coast and come up with a forecast for 3 to 4 weeks from now.
The longer you go out in time, the more volatility there is in terms of the overall atmospheric pattern. And trying to figure out what's going to happen a month from now is probably a lot more difficult than, say, 2 weeks from now or 3 months from now.
It's complicated, and forecasters gather data from around the world. For clues, they study weather patterns like El Nino and La Nina that develop in the Pacific Ocean.
Whether or not it's unseasonably warm or unseasonably cool in the Pacific waters has a major say in the weather all across the world. The Pacific Ocean, again, controls the weather.
And they look at something called the Madden-Julian Oscillation, or MJO, halfway around the world.
The Madden-Julian Oscillation is actually a measure of the wind profiles in the Indian Ocean and how they relate to the Himalayas. There are 8 phases of the Madden-Julian Oscillation. In phase 8, phase 1, or phase 2, those 3 phases, that usually corresponds with a cold, stormy, and snowy period in the eastern part of the United States.
Meteorologists have gotten really good at forecasting hurricanes and almost exactly where they'll make landfall. But there's still tons of work to be done before they can say that a particular area will get snow in mid-December or a bride will see sunshine on her wedding day in May. Where do you see all of this going in the years to come?
I see it just getting better.
And that could mean mid-range forecasts that could save lives, property, and money. I'm Mike Gilliam for Simply Science.
When we think wearable tech, we think smartwatches or step counters that we wear on our wrists. But coming soon, game-changing full body attachments. Here's Ari Goldberg.
Meet Picasso. It stands for Perceptive and Adaptive Soft Wearable Robot. It's not an arm brace. It's not something out of Iron Man. It is something called a wearable exoskeleton, and it is the brainchild of City College robotics specialist Hao Su.
Our modular upper limb exoskeleton is the most lightweight powered wearable robot in the world because MyLab developed the most lightweight motor and also the most lightweight robot.
Hao Su and his team were awarded a $2.78 million grant from the National Science Fund to develop Picasso. Now, most of the time, the word exoskeleton is associated with the hard external covering that gives insects their structure. But in Hao Su's field, a powered exoskeleton is a wearable, mobile machine. And his is a pioneering project in the burgeoning field of soft robotics.
Software robotics is an emerging research field that we use software materials to create robots. Conventionally, people use rigid materials like metal to construct robotic systems. The new approach is based on soft materials like rubber, fabric, those kind of soft materials to make robots.
So what can this robot be used for, and who is supposed to use it?
It can help people with disabilities, both for upper limb disability and also for people with lower limb disabilities, because the robot can generate mechanical forces to work in concert with human being. And it can also be used to augment human capability, like soldiers, workers, to reduce musculoskeletal injuries for people, for able-bodied population.
According to Hao Su, the robot can generate 30 to 40% of a human's torque. So for instance, if you suffered a stroke, Picasso can supply significant assists to compensate for muscle weakness. Or if you're an able-bodied laborer, well, that's all the less energy you have to expend to get a job done. And more remarkable is just how intuitive it is to use. No buttons, no joysticks here.
So how does the robot interact with the human's intention? How does it know what the person wants to do?
So essentially, we come up with a very clever idea that can detect the human intention. It's based on basically the person can wear a small camera on the body. Let's say if you plan to, if you intend to grab a mug, and the robot can detect this kind of like intention, the basic movement. Even you cannot, because of disability.
And even with all this pioneering tech, it actually costs 85% less than conventional assistive robotics, because it uses less expensive, softer materials than metals. And economic implications like that are indeed a major component of the project.
One key goal of this project is we want to understand the economic impact for people with disabilities to wear this exoskeleton, both from the user's perspective and also from the company's perspective. From the company's perspective, we want to understand if the robot can really bring benefit to the employees and to enhance productivity using this kind of like a smart assistive device.
Professor Hao Su's next steps? Refining his team's designs and software and having Picasso widely available in 2021. For Simply Science, I'm Ari Goldberg.
Is it possible dogs have a challenger for the position of man's best friend? Nah. Wait, maybe? Studies suggest that wild red foxes near urban areas are beginning to self-domesticate, showing up at people's doors for food and fun. Oh, there's one now. Pardon me, what drove you to self-domesticate?
No one drove me. I had to trot. Now, if you'll excuse me, it's dinner time.
Oh, so you're in it for the food?
Well, yeah. You ever try to get a decent meal in the woods? If a bear doesn't kill you, his smell will.
And tell me, how do you overcome your fear of humans?
You know what? You should talk to my buddy, Dr. Mark Bekoff. He's Professor Emeritus of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology at the University of Colorado in Boulder.
I've known about this fox study for quite a long time. I think it's fascinating in terms of the way they change their behavior because of their proximity to humans. But we're intruding into their habitats, and they are able to adapt to our presence, mainly because of the fact that they're small, they have a very general diet, and, you know, on average, they can do well with us. Well, I lived in the mountains outside of Boulder, Colorado for many years, and I had a family of red foxes there for many years. It was this young male, Foxy we used to call him, who would literally sit outside my door waiting for my dog Jethro to come out. I think one of the reasons too was Jethro would let him eat his food. They got along, they sometimes slept next to one another, but I can tell you right now, Foxy wasn't domesticated. I mean, I remember one day watching them play, And then Foxy just turned around, saw a mouse, went after it and got it like that. Jethro was a thoroughly inept predator. I would watch him sometimes watch Foxy, and I would watch him go out and try to get a mouse or a chipmunk around my house. Zero success. I always say that these animals have thousands and thousands of years of wildness in their brains and in their hearts. And they may like us and socialize with us. We were friends on their terms, not our terms.
Do you see them actually becoming domesticated to the point where they'll live in the house among other pets?
I don't think foxes will domesticate to that point. People sometimes have said to me, oh, that would be neat to have a pet fox. And I'll go, no, there wouldn't be anything neat about it at all. I once had a pet Darwin's fox, actually, who had been rescued. And he got out of his enclosure in my house. We were rehabilitating him. He had been injured. And in a half hour, he took the house apart, literally tore the house apart, peed and pooped all over. And I knew him to the point that when I was home, I could sometimes work and he would just lay next to me. But the whole self-domestication hypothesis rests on the animals selectively breeding with one another to perpetuate certain traits. I don't think anybody could estimate how long that would take.
Red foxes from the wild may make good playmates occasionally, but you don't want them as part of the family.
You might. I don't, and I know them well.
Best of luck to you, and where do we see you next?
Just catch me on TV.
What channel?
Fox News, of course.
Now, from wild foxes to flying foxes, which are actually huge bats. Andrew Falzone spoke with Dr. Susan Sang, Bat Girl.
I work on bat evolution and conservation, and most of my work is in collaboration with folks who also work on disease ecology.
And Susan Sang's work has taken her to the far reaches of the globe. She's a research associate for the American Museum of Natural Science and History. In 2020, she was recognized by the U.S. State Department after she received the Aspire Prize from the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Group for excellence in scientific research and cooperation with regional scientists in the South Pacific. The bats that she studies are unique because of their size.
So I focus on this group called flying foxes, which are these really, really big bats. They are about like the size of my forearm, so it's like a foot long almost. So most of the bats here in the United States are pretty tiny. They're like the size of your fist.
She started studying them during her graduate years because of what makes them so unique.
Bats are the only true flying mammals. The other mammals that are called like flying lemurs or flying squirrels, they're actually just gliding. Bat wings are like if you had your hand and your fingers got really long and there's webbing in between it, right? So like it does this to make a shape. It doesn't just do like a straight line. And so the way that you fly is really different because now you can pivot or you can respond to things that are coming at you in a different way.
And while the idea of touching a bat may creep you out, Susan says that fear is mostly unfounded. They are not all bloodsuckers.
There's over 1,400 species of bats in the world, and only 3 of them are vampire bats. They're only found in Central and South America, so they're not even near most people.
And while they may not be nature's cutest critters, there are still other misconceptions about bats, especially since the scientific community believes that the virus that causes COVID-19 came from a bat population.
Just because of the way that their bodies are built, they are able to basically tolerate having viruses at a low load and not spend the energy to get rid of them because it's not worth their time. Whereas like if we had something floating in us, our immune system would just like be triggered and try to act immediately, and we can't tolerate those.
Actually, in light of the recent coronavirus pandemic and its origins, have you seen a greater level of interest in the research that you're doing?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are really interested because one of the other things that I work on is illegal wildlife trafficking. And that has come up repeatedly in conversation because of the implication that at the wildlife market in Wuhan was where that contact was first, happening in a way where it can then transfer over. And I think a lot of people are really now interested in this intersection between disease ecology and like infectious disease outbreaks and conservation, not just in the sense of like wildlife poaching, but also with land use change and with things that we're doing to the environment outside of just that direct contact.
And learning how to coexist with bats will not only help them, but help us as well.
A lot of the problems that we see often come from us creating situations like that. And we also don't invest enough money in doing like preventative research. So what happens is we end up having a pandemic and we don't know where to target our resources.
I'm Andrew Falzone for Simply Science.
And finally, this note. We congratulate first responder Sandra Lindsay, Director of Critical Care Nursing at Long Island Jewish Medical Center in Queens. At a December news conference with Governor Andrew Cuomo, Lindsay became the first person in the United States to be vaccinated against the coronavirus. She says many are still skeptical about taking the Pfizer vaccine, and she wanted to lead by example. Sandra Lindsay is a proud graduate of Lehman College in the Bronx. Congratulations. And that's our show. Remember, you can always find us at tv.cuny.edu and Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. I'm Barry Mitchell. Happy New Year, and we'll see you next time on Simply Science.